Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for joining. We are gonna wait another minute just to let the time for people to join. So yeah, we'll start in about a minute. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Welcome, welcome, and thank you for taking the time to join this Ping, SailPoint, and Arctic presentation around Zero Trust. So today we have four speakers with us. We have Frederick, who's CEO of Arctic Group. We have Anders, who's the senior IAM expert and team lead at Arctic Group. Federico, who is our regional solutions architect at Ping, and Rasmus, who is a senior solution engineer at SailPoint. So again, thank you all for joining. Welcome, and we're gonna start the presentation. I'm gonna hand it over to Frederick now.
Thank you, Adam. My name is Frederick Rossum, and as Adam said, I'm the CEO of Arctic Group. I also believe you can ask questions during this webinar. You can do that in the bottom to the right. I will give you a very briefly and short presentation about Arctic Group. That's not what's most important today. But you can, of course, contact me, or welcome to contact me afterwards for more information. Arctic Group used to be privately owned, but two weeks ago, we were bought by an impact fund from based in Stockholm. So that's not the truth anymore, but we are a rather big company based in northern Sweden, where we have our office. And we work we've chosen a strategy to work with large customers and organizations like Telia, Max, Vattenfall, and Metro, and so on. We don't work with 500 customers at the same time, but we work with large companies that we think we can do a lot of good solutions to. And we often have responsibility to those systems we work with all around the clock. So thank you. And we have stated a strategy to work with some niche areas. And that's the way we have it done for the last 20 years. One of those is IAM, Identity Access Management, which we'll be talking more about today. I'm not the real expert, that will Anders do and other guys today. But we also have real expertise in Atlassian. We have it in system integration, and we have that in system maintenance or management. And often when we work in a large assignment, and we have one or more of these niche areas in the same delivery, because when we do a large like SailPoint installation, then there are also system integration involved, and so on. You can go. It doesn't matter. And what we said that we've chosen a strategy to work with partners that strengthen our offer and the competence in the delivery we do. And therefore, I'm thankful that we can run this webinar together with Ping and SailPoint today. And we have some other partners also, and that's because we want to always deliver a good solution for every customer that we meet along the way. You can go back one picture. Thank you. the vision of how we work. We want to make society a safer place by doing good in the IT area. And to do that, we have to be really professional and consultative and simple in the way we do the work, and how our employees act, and how we as a company act. And therefore, we have seen for a very, very long time that it works really good for us. And of course, we want to have really fun when we work, because we do it a lot of hours every week. So Anders, I leave it up to you.
Okay, thank you, Frederick. I hope my voice is okay. I'm a bit sick. I'll do my best. Anders is working or been leading the IAM team at Arctic Group for that's been around now for more than 20 years in the industry. We have worked with a lot of different customers around the Nordics, but also in Europe around IAM related issues. It's been a fun journey, and what we can see over the last 3 to 5 years, it's been accelerating quite a lot. We do a lot of things within the IAM area, but starting from pre-study, helping with design implementation, also help with operation and maintenance when we're done with projects, if needed. We do training and plus much more. When we look into a new customer or a new partner that we want to learn more about, we focus on 3 important areas or topics. We want to make sure that we do the projects in the right order. We want to make sure that our partners or vendors also focus on these things. Identity-centric remote workforce and zero trust. And I will explain a little bit more about each and every one of them. Identity-centric. There's been a shift over the last, I would say, 20 years now, that identity is much more in focus. This meaning both from a business perspective, but also from, of course, from an IT security perspective. Because nowadays, the identity is the target for hackers. So it's the way in to the company secret to actually hack the identity. For example, phishing emails, etc. A good way. That eventually might end up with some ransomware attack or something else. And we have numbers of examples in the Nordics the last months, and almost one new every week around this. So when we start projects, it's very important to get control over your identities and users that you have in your systems, and what they can do, permissions, what are they allowed to do, and what are they not allowed to do. And this is something that you can refer to as a joiner, mover, leaver process that you have to have control over. What will happen when a person leaves the company? Make sure that all his or her permissions go away, etc. Also, when they move around in the company, change position. Make sure that you remove permissions and grant new permissions for the new apartment. This is very important. Moving on to remote workforce, that's, I would say, during the pandemic, the last 18 months or so, it's been quite obvious that you can consider everyone remote nowadays. And it's been really great to see that it's been working very well. A lot of companies say from day one, you could start to work from home or work remote, and it actually worked quite well. And this is, I would say, fantastic news in the IT industry. So the day-to-day work, we're pretty much up and running within a week. But now when it's sort of going back to normal, and you start to realize, okay, this is okay to do it from a technical perspective, but is it secure enough? When we talk to companies, we look around in the Nordics, they start to realize that, okay, it's working, but it's probably not as secure as we want it to be, especially when we read in the papers around all the different attacks that's coming in. And this is becoming a huge problem for the business. They start to realize that their IAM or access management infrastructure is not up to date. You might be running old product versions, no patches, and a lot of other different things. Perhaps not even MFA that you definitely need. So this area is extremely important nowadays to look into and realize that everyone is remote. Finally, zero trust. The concept, or maybe the buzzword, not sure what we should call it, but I prefer a concept. Rasmus and Federico will explain much more about what it is, but it's been around for quite some time, actually, more than 10 years. So it's nothing new. What's new about it is that everyone has started to talk about it over the last 2, 3, 4 years. And the concept itself is extremely important when you have a secure environment at your company. When we look at companies, we see it's really important that our partners, products that we look into, do they really understand what zero trust is? Do they see it as a buzzword or as a concept that they try to adopt? This is, when we at Arctic Group look into vendors, very important to discover. We want to make sure that they invest in this concept. Technical, R&D, and everything. So this is really important topic. Yeah, and so I will actually hand over now to Federico from Ping Identity to explain a bit more. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Anders. Yeah, so why zero trust? As Anders mentioned, it's something that people keep discussing, but why zero trust in the first place, right? If we think about a traditional security model, think about the enterprise 20 years ago, 15 years ago, right? Everything was in one place. All the organizations managed their applications, their databases, and everything was in their own data center. Also, all the users were in the office. So we all went to work in the office. All the access happened from the office network. And in the vast majority of the situations, we used computers and laptops that were issued by our IT departments. So the company, the organization, had full control over the devices that were used to get access to the business applications and the business data. If you think about this environment, it was relatively simple to define a perimeter and to secure that perimeter, right? Everything was in one place, well-defined perimeter, relatively easy to protect. These days, the environment is completely different, right? In the past 20 years, 15 years, we've seen a shift to a completely new environment, right? And the workforce is remote, like Anders just said, right? And COVID just accelerated that the possibility of users working from home. The applications, so the cloud environments are not something that only few organizations are looking at. The vast majority of, well, all our customers, all the organizations started looking at cloud resources. So we find ourselves in an environment that is hybrid by definition. We still have many applications and resources running on premise in our own data centers, but we also have public data centers, and we're all using SaaS apps. Also, the devices, right? Organizations do not fully control the devices any longer, right? Many of us typically use their own devices to get access to corporate resources. And some organizations also need to worry about things, right? So we have things that are now smart devices that can connect to our network. And finally, the ecosystem has become more complex, right? It's not only our data that we need these days, but we need to work with our business partners. We need to make sure that we can effectively exchange data with our business partners to provide a good experience for our users and our customers. So it becomes obvious that the context is completely different, and the old perimeter doesn't exist any longer. The internet is the new perimeter, and because of it, the attack surface is way more broader, and we need a new security model to protect this new complex and distributed environment. And this is when people started talking about zero trust. Again, zero trust is not something new, but people started discussing about it in recent times, in the past 5 or 6 years, after Gartner started talking about zero trust as a concept. And again, zero trust is a concept, right? What's the principle behind zero trust? Next slide, please. So the idea behind zero trust, again, is that the enterprise network is not sufficient any longer to determine trust, right? As we said, there's no enterprise network any longer. It's a distributed environment where the perimeter is blurred. But how do we define trust then? How do we determine trust then? So the idea behind zero trust is that you never implicitly trust any access type, and you always authenticate and authorize. So what that means is that companies need to always authenticate and identify a user. They always need to authenticate a device. Once the user has been authenticated and once the device has been authenticated, all access must be authorized. And what do I mean by all access? I mean network access, application access, and data access. And we need to do that in a smart way. We need to do that with dynamic policies that can look at a variety of data sources, right? So all the systems that enforce the authentication and authorization policies need to be smart systems that can look at the identity of the user, but also they can look at the context of the user to make smart decisions on whether the user can go from place A to place B in the network, whether the user can access application A coming from network B, given the fact that he's using a non-trusted device. So, and as you can see, this is not just a single capability, right? It's wrong to think about zero trust, and it's thinking that a single vendor, a single capability can enable zero trust. To enable zero trust, organizations need to address a broad set of capabilities. So in the next slides, we summarized what the capabilities are. So we have to start with identity, right? So we believe that identity is at the core of every zero trust journey, because if you do not know who the user is, if you cannot authenticate the user, if you do not know what entitlements a user has, all the other controls that we put in place become meaningless. It's actually impossible to control where the user can go, what the user can access, if we do not know who the user is and what the user entitlements are. So identity is the foundational capability, and other capabilities can build on top of identity. once we've got the identity correctly set up, we can start looking at the network, right? So if you, as we said before, in a traditional security model, organizations simply protected the perimeter with firewalls, and within the network, everything was fine. Remote work started where we started having the remote access needs, so we set up VPNs. But again, VPNs are not granular, right? So VPNs just create a tunnel from your home into the company network. But again, that's a tunnel that gives access to the whole network, right? With a zero trust model, we don't want to do that. We don't want to enable broad access to a full segment of the network. We need to be able to define microsegments in our networks, and we need to be able to say, okay, user A has correctly authenticated. User A works for the marketing department, and therefore user A can only access the microsegment networks that allow him to use the marketing web applications. User B is an admin, right? An admin obviously has different privileges, and because of that, the admin can access different microsegments and with different protocols. An admin can connect to a machine using shell, for example, whereas a marketing or an HR user cannot. So there's a whole set of network capabilities that we need to worry about, and those network capabilities need to be implemented with specific vendors. Moving on, we mentioned that previously all the devices were devices issued by the company, the organizations, and therefore the company had full control over those devices. I mean, the security policies, the security posture on the device was fully managed by the organization. These days, we live again in a world where, yes, we do have company-issued devices, but we also have personal devices. Therefore, we need a set of capabilities that allow us to control the devices, to understand the posture of the device, and based on that data, make smart decisions, and smart authorizations and authentication decisions. Moving on, we need to be able to control access to the data. We need to be able to control access to the applications. And again, we need to be able to enforce all these policies and to enforce all the authentications and authorization decisions based on the context, right? We need to have solutions that can look at the context of the user, can capture the data from those multiple sources, aggregate that context data, and make smart decisions on whether a user can access the network, can use that device to access the network, can use that device to access that piece of data or that application. Moving on, context we've mentioned and applications we've mentioned. As you can see, it's a broad set of capabilities, right? And on this slide, I'm not going to go into the details of this slide. It would take 2 hours just to discuss the details of it. But this is mainly to show that, again, not to our knowledge, a best of breed is needed today. No vendor can effectively address all the capabilities needed to implement a zero trust strategy end to end. As you can see, there are vendors that specialize on the network security. There are vendors that specialize on the device management, the data security. We, as Ping Identity, enable the identity and access, right? So we as Ping Identity provide the capabilities for correctly authenticating users, for ensuring that the user has authenticated with the correct security levels, enabling multi-factor authentication. We enable secure application access by defining web access policies, and we can define and help organizations with defining access and data policies to data. We start from situations where the identity data is ready, right? So we authenticate users, but how do we authenticate users? How do we enforce those authorization policies? We assume that account data and entitlements data is in the right place and is correct. Who ensures that? That is SailPoint. Yes.
Federico, sorry to disturb you. There seems to be some problems with your microphone. Is it close to your shirt or something?
Yeah, let me move that. Is that better now?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so sorry for that. Yeah, as we said, so we enable authentication, multi-factor authorizations, but we need the identity data to be in a good place, right? We start from where SailPoint ends, and I'll pass to Rasmus, and he will briefly describe what SailPoint does in a zero trust environment.
Thank you, Federico. Well put. So Rasmus Lund from SailPoint. So at SailPoint, we have you can stay at that slide if you like. We have truly embraced the zero trust and is building innovative solutions to help to enable us such a never trust, always verify architecture. Sorry for that. Identity security is the true cornerstone of an effective zero trust strategy. It does provide you complete visibility of all user types and the related access, enforces the least privilege using roles and policies, and keeps security up to date and dynamically responds as changes and threats are detected. So we're a true leader in the market. And let's look at some ways that we help our customer meet the zero trust requirements. You can hop to the next slide. So core principle, you can hear this a lot in zero trust talks, and we are not an authentication or identity proofing capability platform. That's more of what Ping does, but we do lay the foundation for an access management infrastructure. So who has access to what and what are they doing with that access? That is our core business. And it's all authentication decisions are reliant on an accurate identity record. So unless you have good quality in your identity data, you will not be very successful in a zero trust setting, I'd say. So what we do is we manage the lifecycle of an identity by discovering, creating, provisioning, and continuously updating the identity record and the related attributes in the directory or the identity store. Because all other access control decisions are based on an identity, it's imperative that that identity data stays fresh and up to date. So you really need to get that 360 view of all your user type and the related access, who has access to what, and that includes all the application and all the permissions given. So and you also need to establish this source of truth, create a clean, accurate identity data that all the access decisions are based on. Yeah, so quality is really key here. And the last point here is integrity. Continuously keep that identity data up to date, so you don't have a stale data and not up to date data. So it needs to be of good quality and updated continuously with throughout the user lifecycle. So this join, remove, leave process is Anders mentioned at the start. Can take the next slide. And deliver just enough timely access. So it's really also key to deliver enough access for someone to do their work, and at the time they need it. Don't just provision and give out access based on nothing basically, but really keep thinking that you should enforce the principle of least privilege. And it's imperative that users are assigned the right roles and privilege from the very beginning. So we do have powerful abilities to bring in attributes and entitlement data and apply this very complex logic using rules, role-based access control, attribute-based access control, policy-based, and separation of duties to ensure that no toxic combinations exist. So enabling this secure, timely access is really the heart of Zero Trust. And it's mentioned throughout several papers on Zero Trust. Cool, we can take the next one, Adam. And from there, move also, just not be happy with enforcing the least privilege, continuously monitor, analyze, and adapt. There's an ever-evolving infrastructure where you guys live in. So you need to apply also continuous monitorization. And this is really the heart of the SailPoint solution. We do provide artificial intelligence, machine learning driven adaptive governance and access intelligence capabilities that allows us not only to manage, but also monitor, of course, and govern identities across your environment, including your most valuable resources, such as cloud infrastructure as a service environments and your sensitive data stores. We also continuously evaluate the FAK of access controls. Do users have the right permissions? How are they using those permissions? How should the policy be adjusted to ensure proper access to? So you don't live in a static world. We do live in a dynamic, rapid, fast-paced world, and our platform accommodates with this. Cool, we can take the next one. And I think that's your turn again, Federico.
Yeah, so we said what Zero Trust is, what the capabilities are, but how do you get there, right? So it's think of it as a journey. It's not a one-off project. It's not a one-off task that organizations typically take to move to Zero Trust. It's a continuous journey of transformation, right? So you start by establishing the identity foundation. That is what we said before, right? As a first step, I cannot do anything. I cannot define what the user can get access to if I don't have the identity under control. And as we said, SailPoint takes care of ensuring that all the user accounts and the entitlements are in the right place. We as Ping Identity start from there, and from there we can ensure a seamless single sign-on experience using single sign-on multi-factor authentication. But once you have the identity correctly set up, what do you have to worry about next? Well, you have to optimize the new perimeter, right? And that, again, is about worrying this new and broad network that we need to deal with. And you typically do that with solutions that look at the network, that look at this new broad perimeter, that can create microsegments in the network and can authorize users from going to place A to place B according to the user data, the profile data, the entitlements data, and the context data. Once you've established the identity, once you've optimized and correctly protected the perimeter, what can you do next? Well, at that point, you can start evolving into smarter decisions, right? At that point, I think organizations are ready to start adding intelligence and risk-based decisions. That means that it's not only the current context that we're looking, but we can also start looking at historical context. Okay, we can look at all the historical data that we've captured across our systems, and based on that data, we can start building machine learning models that allow us to identify anomalies in the system, right? So if a user typically goes from place A to place B in the network and typically gets access to a specific application using a certain device, that is all interesting data that we can use to build our model. And if we have machine learning and if we have machine learning in place, and if we have the right models in place, we can identify anomalies and therefore further increase the level of security of our overall infrastructure. Risk and intelligence also can be a big factor in reducing friction, right? Because the ultimate goal of an identity platform should be to provide security being invisible to the end user, right? Our end goal is to always be there, look at every transaction, look at every access attempt, apply smart policies, apply machine learning, and essentially never get into the way of our users, right? So, and that is what we think is important, right? So the final step should be, okay, now I am secure. How can I improve the user experience in that secure context? Because of course, being secure, asking the user to authenticate 10 times a day is relatively easy. The challenging part is to be secure, but at the same time to be invisible. And you can get there once you have the right infrastructure in place, once you have the correct algorithms in place that look at the risk of what the user is doing, and based on that decide whether the user have to authenticate or whether we can trust a session that was established 5 days ago. So we can be secure, but at the same time, we just let the user use and access the data that he needs to use. On the next slide, again, it's just a summary of what we said up to this point. How do we establish that identity foundation? We start correctly identifying and storing the identity data and the user permissions. That's what SailPoint does effectively. We start from there. We use that data to create a seamless single sign-on and authentication flow with multi-factor authentication flow. So once all our applications are connected to this central identity system, at that point, we have a clear grasp on who the users are, where the users can go, and we can start looking at the next phases in the journey. On the next slide, Rasmus will quickly cover how Ping and SailPoint work together to get you there. Rasmus.
Yeah. So thank you, Federico. And it's pretty obvious, I guess, I hope, up until this time, how we work together. So the integration of Ping and SailPoint, it really enables you to provide access to applications in the public cloud, private cloud, or on-premise, and you can be secure in the knowledge that the correct users are getting access to the application and data they require. So, and you're able to achieve this true balance between security and convenience, as Federico mentioned, for your users, while completely demonstrating compliance and maintaining an access audit trail for every identity. And how we really do this is by SailPoint takes really care of the user profile, empowers the users with policy-based self-service access to all of their applications, data, and systems they need to do. And the Ping Identity platform authenticates its user from anywhere on any device with a flexible identity solution that can detect who that user is and what the appropriate access should be based on the identity profile. So essentially, we create a profile, we gather all the entitlements from all the systems and applications in your environment, we build the identity profile, the Ping Identity platform consumes that profile's attributes and permissions for a truly seamless user experience. And this applies to both on-premise and in a hybrid world, more or less. You can take the next slide there. So just some more notes on this. This two very flexible solutions that work well together. So with the Ping, you can choose it to deploy it according to your needs. Shows your amount of the customization you need. Shows to manage as a managed service or run it yourself, and shows you the side control of the security posture. A really powerful tool there. AI, and for the SailPoint part, you can control both the structured and unstructured data in a permission sense. So who has access to what also applies to this, of course, the unstructured data. And you can leverage the AI tools for all the users, employee, contractors, partners, and even bots. I mean, all that requires a digital identity needs to be governed, and it can be powered and fueled by AI. And optimize for hybrid IT environments. So people still run mainframes, they still run on a lot of applications on-prem, but the shift is going to towards the hybrid world as such. And SailPoint can also be very flexible in the deployment options. So data center, public cloud, MSP, true SaaS, depending on your needs and requirements. So we do have a very wide and both to widen the breadth of the platform. I will not go into details on each and everything, but we are a market-leading vendor for identity governance, and we do have a very flexible set of products in our platform, which can also leverage the AI and the machine learning. We also have a extensibility in form of the APIs and event triggers. And we see more and more that AI gain traction in order to help people with their identity governance programs. Yeah, we can take the next one. That's yours, Federico.
Yeah, and again, final slide from us. We've briefly touched upon the capabilities of Ping Identity in a zero trust environment. We said multiple times that we have to be able to correctly authenticate, identify, and authorize the users as part of our zero trust journey, and we have to do that continuously, right? It can't be that we only authenticate and authorize once and then the user can go everywhere. So authorization and authentication needs to be fine-grained. It needs to be continuously evaluated, and Ping can help with that. As mentioned, we become in a zero trust environment, we become the identity provider. So Ping becomes the component that provides the identity data for all the applications and for all the systems connected in the ecosystems. And this slide really just summarizes that. So highlighting that we can effectively authenticate, authorize, and verify the users that take part in a zero trust environment. That completes our presentation. We have some time left, so I'll give control back to Adam for questions.
Thank you, Federico. So we have a Q&A function on the bottom of your screen where you can basically type any questions that you have for our speakers. We already have a couple of questions, so I'm going to start with the first one. If I want to modernize my company's IAM environment, which product should I start with, SailPoint or Ping Identity?
All right, yeah, I'll take that one. Yeah, that's a very valid point. So as we mentioned a couple of times, Ping Identity and SailPoint work together. They help building this identity foundation that is needed for zero trust. And we do slightly different things, right? SailPoint focuses on ensuring that the identity data is correct and all the accounts and the entitlements are the correct entitlements are in the right places. So we also said that once the identity data is in good shape, we start as Ping Identity from there, and we consume that identity data to correctly authenticate and authorize users to provide a seamless single sign-on experience. So if we think about these two roles, I would say that organizations that do not have a good identity data, they should start with SailPoint. That would allow the organization to take control of the identity data first, to gain visibility into the identity data and the user entitlements. And once they've completed that initial step, we as Ping Identity can start enabling our capabilities on top of that. That being said, though, the way I say it is that SailPoint does all the data work, right? Which is extremely important, but at the same time is not super visible to end users, right? It's all about organizing the data in the backends, making sure that organizations understands the identity data, understands the permissions, understands the entitlements. But that's not visible to the end user. Whereas single sign-on and multi-factor authentication are super visible to end users, and typically organizations and the business considers those quick wins. So the the approach that we typically see is that a project starts with the identity data first, therefore SailPoint, but as soon as possible, the single sign-on and multi-factor authentication capabilities are deployed, and therefore we see the two projects running in parallel, with SailPoint being the first one that gets addressed and approached.
Thank you, Federico. We have a second question. We have a lot of third-party vendors / users that access our systems and have not good control of those. Can SailPoint or Ping Identity help with this use case?
I'll take that one. So yes, definitely. I mean, third-party vendors or wherever they may come from, there is still a digital identity, and as such, they need to be governed. They have privilege, and they do have access to, most of the time, also quite sensitive records within an organization. So absolutely, they need to be enrolled, and they need to be certified at given intervals, and then they need to be kept up to date as any other profile. And to add on top of that, they also, you can leverage federation, and they need to use multi-factor authentication and other control mechanisms as well as any other identity would. I don't know if you want to add to that answer, Federico.
It's fine, yeah, and again, the message is always the same, right? So once you've got good control over the partner data, the vendor's data, at that point you can quickly enable single sign-on and federation for those by establishing federated connections with the identity providers that those partners might have.
Thank you. We have a third question. I think it's for you, Federico. Do Ping support FIDO2 tokens?
Yeah, absolutely. So Ping Identity supports multi-factor in general. So multi-factor, we are all familiar with the classic SMS OTP. We are familiar with the email OTP, right? Of course, we do support those methods that we consider legacy methods, though. On top of that, we support more modern, strong authentication methods, and FIDO is definitely one of those methods that Ping Identity supports.
All right. I don't think we have any other questions. All right. Yeah, I think that was it, guys. Thank you all for joining. Really appreciate your time. It was a great discussion. If you want to learn more, or if you have any questions, just reach out to Federico or Rasmus or myself. We'll be happy to help you go further if you want to do a demonstration. Thank you. The replay will be available on our websites. And yeah, I have to wish you a good day.
Thank you. Thank you for joining. Thank you, Adam.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you, all.